My husband and his friends tricked me into signing a gift agreement for my inheritance. I overheard him say, "We'll flip her grandparents' house." I walked in and said, "You just committed fraud, my lawyer's been listening the whole time." They froze mid-laugh. My name is Marla, and I'm 42 years old. I've always considered myself a practical woman. Not cold, not cynical, just grounded. I work in art restoration in Asheville, North Carolina, which means I spend most of my days under a soft lamp with a magnifying glass, trying to preserve little pieces of history for people who barely notice they exist. It's delicate work. Slow work. But it's work that matters, at least to me. 6 years ago, I married Dennis. He was everything I wasn't. Charming, loud, full of energy. He could walk into a room and within minutes have strangers talking to him like old friends. He had a confidence that looked like stability, like strength. He worked in real estate, flipping houses, short-term rentals, investment properties. He made his money fast and liked it faster. We met at a fundraiser for a local gallery. He told me I looked like I belonged in a painting. I rolled my eyes, but I didn't walk away. At the time, it felt like fate. Or at least, it felt like change, which I desperately needed. I just lost my grandmother Evelyn, the woman who, along with my grandfather Walter, had raised me after my parents were killed in a car crash when I was 6. She was the last of my family. Their house, a creaky old Victorian in Montford, had come to me when Evelyn passed. It was more than a house, it was my childhood, my security, the only truly permanent thing I'd ever had. The house had character. Real character. Ivy-covered bricks, a narrow staircase with worn wood steps, a sunroom that always smelled faintly of lavender and dust. Most people would see a money pit, but to me, it was sacred. And Dennis, at first, he seemed to understand. When I showed him the house, he said it was like stepping into a movie. He'd run his hand along the banister and smiled at me, said, "I get why you love it." That was before. The first few years of our marriage were fine. Not perfect, not terrible. Dennis traveled a lot for work, always bouncing between properties or looking at land to buy. I liked the solitude, to be honest. When he was home, he talked big, about future plans, building something together, investing in our future. I nodded along, mostly. It sounded like ambition. It didn't sound like manipulation. Not yet. Things started to shift about a year ago. He began to comment on the house more often. The wiring was old. The kitchen was cramped. The porch needed to be opened up. He'd say these things casually, like he was helping. But the tone felt different. One night, while I was making tea, he said, "You ever think about how much we could get for this place if we updated it?" I laughed, assuming he was joking. "We?" I asked. "This house isn't for sale." He didn't push back, not that night. But the comments didn't stop. A few weeks later, he brought up a gift agreement. "It's just a formality," he said over dinner. "It'll protect us both. Legal stuff, in case something ever happens. You know how these inheritance things can get messy." I was tired. I'd had a long day at work, cleaning soot from a 100-year-old portrait of a man whose eyes looked too real. I remember that distinctly. I barely read the document he gave me. It was dense, full of legal jargon. He sat next to me on the couch while I signed it, kissed my temple after I put the pen down. "I appreciate you," he said, smiling. I didn't ask questions. I didn't know I was signing away any part of my house. The real unraveling began months later. I was restoring a Civil War-era landscape painting late one evening in the museum's basement lab. I realized I'd left my color sample sketchbook at home. I needed it for a school visit the next morning. It was already dark, but I figured I'd just swing by and grab it. When I got home, Dennis's car was in the driveway, along with 2 others I didn't recognize. I walked to the front door, about to knock like a guest in my own home, when I heard them. They were in the living room, drinking. Laughing. I heard my name. "She signed it, man." She had no idea. It's basically ours now. Once we flip her grandparents' house, we're looking at 6 figures easy. Someone else laughed. "You're cold, dude." Dennis replied, "She's sentimental. All I had to do was call it a gift." My lawyer said it's solid. I don't remember breathing. I remember standing there, frozen, hand still hovering over the door handle. My skin went cold. My stomach twisted. I thought I might throw up. But instead, I opened the door. They all turned, startled. Like boys caught smoking behind the school gym. "I hope that joke was worth it," I said. My voice didn't shake. I was surprised by that. Dennis tried to smile. Hey, babe, you're home early. I said, holding up my phone. And Jenna's been on this call the entire time. Jenna is my cousin. And a damn good estate lawyer. The room went silent. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I had her look into that agreement weeks ago, I continued. She said it looked shady. So I let you talk. I let you play. And now you're caught. The look on Dennis's face will stay with me forever. First disbelief, then rage, then fear. Jenna's voice came through the phone speaker. We have everything. We'll be filing in the morning. I walked past them all, into the kitchen, grabbed my sketchbook, and walked right back out. Not a single one of them said a word. The next day, Jenna filed a petition to void the agreement based on fraudulent intent. She also filed a restraining order, just in case. Dennis texted me 20 times that day. Called 30 more. His last message just said, we need to talk. We didn't. We haven't since. The court ruled in our favor. The agreement was invalidated. Dennis's claims were dismissed. The judge called his actions premeditated deception with financial motivation. I kept the house. The divorce proceedings began shortly after. My house feels different now. Not just because of what happened, but because of what it survived. What I survived. I'm still fixing things, pipes, windows, my heart. But every morning, I sit in the sunroom with coffee and listen to the birds outside. I think of Evelyn. Of Walter. Of their voices in this house. I think they'd be proud I stood up for it. For myself. I'm not done healing, not yet. But I'm getting there. After Dennis moved out, the silence in the house felt different. It wasn't the comfortable quiet I used to enjoy when he was away for work. It was heavy. Tense. Every creak in the floorboards, every distant car passing on Montfort Avenue felt amplified. Like the house itself was holding its breath, unsure of what came next. I started sleeping in the guest room. Our bedroom, my bedroom now, smelled like his cologne, like betrayal. I couldn't bear to touch the sheets. The closet still had one or two of his old jackets, and I kept meaning to box them up, but somehow I couldn't do it. Not yet. It wasn't about missing him, it was about processing the weight of how much I'd let myself ignore. Dennis had fooled me, yes. But I had helped. I'd ignored the signs. I'd wanted to believe in something so badly, love, security, a shared future, that I didn't see the lie until it was laid bare and laughing in my living room. The court dates dragged on. Divorce is never a clean process, especially when property and money are involved. Dennis fought at first, trying to claim he had been misled, that he didn't understand the legal consequences of the gift agreement. His lawyer, a tired-looking man in his 50s who clearly knew he was fighting a losing battle, kept pushing for mediation. Jenna didn't budge. This was calculated, she told me one night after court. We were sitting in her car, eating drive-thru fries, both exhausted. They don't get to play dumb now. You don't trick someone into signing over their house and then cry a misunderstanding. I nodded but didn't speak. I was too tired to be angry. Too numb to celebrate the victories. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into restoration projects with a kind of manic focus. I'd spend hours under the microscope, scraping centuries of grime from canvas, touching up damaged oils with precise strokes. There was something comforting about fixing something that had been broken by time and carelessness. Sometimes, I'd find myself talking to the portraits. You've seen worse, haven't you? I'd whisper to a 1920s society lady, her eyes narrowed in amusement. Bet no one ever tried to steal your parlor out from under you. Outside of work, I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Neal, soft-spoken, perceptive, with a patience that felt maternal. She never rushed me. Never filled the silences. It's not just what he did, I told her during one of our early sessions. It's that I didn't stop him. That I didn't even look. That's not weakness, she said. That's trust. You trusted him. He said that. Don't confuse the two. But I did. I confused them every day. Friends I hadn't heard from in years started calling, messaging. Some to offer support, others to get the inside scoop. Asheville wasn't a small town, but the historic community was tightly knit. Everyone knew the house. Everyone had some memory of Evelyn's garden parties, of Walter's old Buick parked out front. News travels fast in places like this. A woman named Renee, a neighbor from down the block, stopped me while I was trimming the front hedges one morning. She was in her 60s, wore gardening gloves like armor, and always had something to say about everyone. I heard about Dennis, she said, not unkindly. I always thought there was something off about him. I didn't answer. Just kept trimming. You know, she added, your grandfather built that porch with his own hands. Took him 6 months. Never used a nail gun. Said it ruined the soul of the wood. That night, I sat on the porch for hours, just listening to the wind move through the trees. I could almost hear Walter's laugh. It made my chest ache. I found old photo albums in the attic one rainy afternoon. Boxes of them. Some I hadn't seen in years. Evelyn in her rose garden, holding a lemonade in one hand and a cigarette in the other. Walter fixing the fence in suspenders. Me, age 8, holding a stuffed rabbit on the front steps. I spent hours going through those photos, laying them out on the floor like puzzle pieces of a life I'd somehow drifted away from. There was one picture that stopped me cold. It was Dennis, standing in front of the fireplace at our engagement party. He had his arm around me, but his eyes were somewhere else. Not on me. Not even on the camera. They were watching someone across the room. He wasn't smiling. I'd never noticed that before. I showed the photo to Jenna the next time she came over. She studied it for a moment, then looked at me. You think he planned it even then? I don't know, I said. But I don't think he ever really wanted me. Not the way I wanted him. She didn't argue. The weeks turned into months. The divorce dragged. Paperwork. Depositions. More paperwork. But slowly, Dennis stopped fighting. His lawyer started sending quiet settlement offers, nothing dramatic, just small, pathetic attempts to hold on to whatever leverage he thought he had. We ignored them all. One afternoon, I got a call from one of Dennis's former friends. A guy named Leo who used to come over for poker nights and beer. I hadn't spoken to him since the night I caught them in the living room. He sounded nervous. Said he didn't want to get involved, but thought I should know Dennis had been trying to sell off some business assets quickly, quietly. That he was panicking. That his reputation had taken a hit, and investors were pulling out. I didn't know he was doing that to you, Leo said. If I had, I would not have, I hung up. I didn't need his guilt. I didn't need any more men trying to wash their hands of things they helped build. The next day, Jenna called with good news. The judge had ruled that Dennis would not receive any proceeds from the property, nor would he have any legal claim to the house. We still had to finalize the divorce, but the worst of it was over. You won, she said. But it didn't feel like winning. I sat in the backyard that night, where Walter used to grow tomatoes and basil. I watched the fireflies blink in and out of the dark. I thought about all the time I'd lost, time I'd given to someone who only saw me as a stepping stone. I wasn't sure what came next. But I knew I wouldn't let anyone walk into my life like that again, not without knowing where they were stepping. Weeks turned into months, and somewhere in the dragging slowness of legal formalities and emotional recovery, I started to notice the quiet rebuilding happening around me, not just in the house, but in myself. The kitchen still had the old laminate counters that Evelyn had once declared practical and easy to wipe. I used to hate them, dreaming of the marble tops Dennis always talked about installing once we renovated. But now, I ran my hand over them in the mornings and found comfort in their smooth, slightly scratched surface. They were still standing. Like me. I found myself spending longer hours outside, digging through the overgrown garden beds in the backyard. Walter's tomatoes hadn't grown in years, but the soil still remembered. One weekend in late spring, I bought seedlings from the farmer's market, heirloom tomatoes, green beans, snapdragons, rosemary, and planted them the way I remembered Walter doing it, kneeling in the dirt with his hands calloused and sure. The work was hard, but it was honest. It didn't lie or smile at you while secretly drafting your downfall. I kept seeing Dr. Neil. Some sessions I talked a lot. Others, I sat in silence, staring at the bookshelves in her cozy little office while she waited me out. Once, I said something I hadn't even realized I was thinking until it came out of my mouth. I didn't just lose Dennis. I lost the version of myself who believed I was safe. She nodded, not pressing for more. That was her style. Gentle, consistent. Safety doesn't mean certainty, she said after a long pause. It means trust. You're rebuilding that, slowly. And that's more powerful than pretending it never broke. I cried for the first time in weeks that day. Not loud, not messy. Just a steady stream of tears that felt like they'd been waiting for permission. Meanwhile, the town kept moving. Asheville was gearing up for tourist season, music festivals, food truck weekends, art walks downtown. I ran into an old college friend, Teresa, while browsing at a local bookshop. We hadn't spoken in years, but she hugged me like no time had passed. She'd heard about the divorce, everyone had, but she didn't ask questions. Just invited me to join her book club, said they needed someone who actually finishes the book. I went. It felt strange at first, being around women who laughed easily, who passed around wine and stories and dog-eared paperbacks. But they didn't ask me to explain myself. They just made room for me. And I started showing up. One of the members, Delilah, ran a small antique shop on the edge of town. She'd heard about my work and asked if I'd be willing to look at a painting her grandmother had kept in the attic for years. I agreed, and when she brought it in, I felt a familiar rush of excitement. It was a faded oil portrait from the 1880s, hidden under decades of dust and grime. I cleaned it slowly, lovingly, over the course of a month. It came back to life in my hands, soft greens, pale blues, the delicate outline of a woman with a determined set to her jaw. When I revealed the final piece to Delilah, she teared up. "I didn't know it could be beautiful again," she said. I nodded, understanding more than she realized. Sometimes we just need to peel back what time and people have done to us. Dennis, meanwhile, faded into the background. I didn't follow his life, didn't check social media or ask around. People occasionally mentioned seeing him, at a bar, at a new listing, looking thinner, more tired. I didn't feel satisfaction. Just distance. Like watching a character from a story I'd stopped reading. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, I found a box I didn't remember packing. Inside were letters from Walter to Evelyn during his time in the Navy. Dozens of them, written in careful cursive, some stained with age, others still sharp and crisp. They were full of everyday details, longing, and love that stretched across oceans. One letter ended with, "I don't know what kind of world I'll return to, but I know you'll be in it. That's all that matters." I sat on the attic floor for hours, reading every single one. Crying. Laughing. Feeling the ghosts of two people who had built something real and lasting in the same house I'd almost lost to someone who never understood the meaning of permanence. That night, I lit a candle in the window. Evelyn used to do that during storms, said it helped the house remember who it belonged to. I liked that idea. That homes have memory. That they can forgive you if you come back to them with honesty. I still wasn't ready to move on. Not in the way people talk about when they suggest dating again or putting yourself out there. I wasn't interested in being anyone's wife, girlfriend, or secret investment. But I was interested in myself again. In rebuilding something steady, rooted. And I was starting to believe, in the quiet moments, that maybe that was enough for now. The divorce was finalized in early October, just as the leaves began to turn and the chill of fall crept through the windows of the old Victorian. The paperwork came in a thick manila envelope, which I opened slowly, deliberately, at the kitchen table. It was done. The house was mine. Fully, legally, without loopholes or lingering shadows. Dennis was gone from my life in every way that mattered. It wasn't a moment of celebration, it was a quiet, hard-earned peace. But as much as I tried to move forward, there was still something that didn't sit right. Dennis had walked away, bruised maybe, but still in the game. He was still buying and selling. Still manipulating people into trusting him, into signing things they didn't fully understand. He hadn't learned anything. And that gnawed at me. I didn't want to hurt him. I didn't want to stoop to his level. But I did want something he wouldn't expect. So I made a plan. I called Leo, his old friend, the one who'd called me months back with his tail between his legs. He'd been on the fringes of the scam, and I knew guilt had been weighing on him since. I offered him coffee, nothing more. We met at a little cafe near the river. He looked older somehow, worn down. He apologized again, but I waved it off. I wasn't there for apologies. I heard Dennis is trying to get into that development deal out in Biltmore Forest, I said casually. That old estate with the zoning issues? Leo blinked. How'd you know? I shrugged. Word gets around. In truth, Jenna had tipped me off. Her firm was working with another client who'd looked into the same property and passed after discovering the foundation problems and encroachment issues. It was a lawsuit waiting to happen. But Dennis, always hungry for the next big thing, wouldn't see that until it was too late. I'm thinking of investing, I said, stirring my tea. But I don't want to go in blind. Think you could connect me with his new business partner? The one with the money. Leo hesitated, but in the end, he agreed. A week later, I was sitting across from a man named Brendan, a slick-talking investor with more confidence than sense. I let him believe I was a potential silent partner with inherited wealth and a desire to diversify. I wore the right clothes, used the right language. I played my part. I met with him 3 times over the next month. Fed him little pieces of information, carefully crafted truths about Dennis's history. Not lies, just truths that Dennis had conveniently left out. The fraudulent agreement. The lawsuit. The court ruling. His reputation in the Asheville community. I let Brendan connect the dots himself. Let him feel clever for uncovering it. By the time Dennis caught wind of what was happening, Brendan had already pulled his money from the Biltmore deal and 3 others Dennis had lined up. Investors talk. One whisper of instability turns into a storm. And Dennis? He couldn't spin his way out of this one. He tried to call me. Twice. I didn't answer. I heard from Jenna later that Dennis was scrambling to unload properties at a loss, trying to stay afloat. He wasn't bankrupt, not yet. But he was bleeding. And I didn't feel bad. Not because I wanted revenge for what he'd done to me, but because I wanted him to understand, finally, that there were consequences. That not everyone he targeted would stay silent. That some people rebuild with steel instead of hope. Life settled into something real after that. I restored 2 more paintings for Delilah's shop. I expanded my little backyard garden. I hosted a dinner for the book club in Evelyn's old dining room, complete with mismatched chairs and rosemary from the garden. The house felt alive again. Not haunted, not tense. Just lived in. One afternoon in late November, I stood on the porch with a cup of cider, watching the last leaves fall from the maple in the front yard. Renee walked by with her dog and called up to me. "Place looks better than it has in years," she said, waving. "It feels better," I replied. And it did. I wasn't looking backward anymore. And I wasn't chasing anything ahead. I was exactly where I was supposed to be.